Hello musicians, welcome back. My name is Buckydurddle and I'm doing another video tutorial on the VCV Rack DAW. This is a great open source modular synthesis DAW and it's a lot of fun. It's really great to use. So hopefully these tutorials will help you learn how to make your own music using these fabulous modules. So today I'm going to be focusing on Valley's module, KoralFX module, Scorovnik. Now this guy down here, this is a sequencer. So you can see KoralFX is the maker of these modules, of this module, and Scorovnik is the actual name of the sequencer that we're going to be reviewing today. Well, doing a tutorial on today. Now, Scorovnik is a great sequencer, and I use it for different things. I love using it, and you've probably seen it in some of my other tutorials. A really powerful sequencer can be the real foundation of a good system, your good music system. So you may find that Scorovnik might be something that may be the centerpiece of your music making after you watch some of these tutorials on how to use it. Now in this tutorial, which is the first tutorial, I'm going to go over a few things. Okay, I'm going to be going over the basic setup of it. I'm going to go over how to choose pitches in the sequencer, and then how to manipulate the note durations, so how to get rhythms going on. I'm also going to talk about the length of your sequences, how to change that, some of the basic controls. I'm also going to be going over tempo, transposition, and loop counts. Okay, now that's just scratching the surface of the sequencer because there are many other things that we can go over in this, but that's the things I'm going to be going over today, and we'll follow up some more details in future tutorials. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, a little bit about my setup I have here. Let's start at the end. This is my audio interface, which is Core audio interface, and I'm just going out to my my outputs. I'm not going to go over much of this because this has been covered in other tutorials, and everybody's system is a little different. So if you have any questions about how I actually have my own personal setup running, you can send me a message in the comments below, or you can get me on the Utopian.io Discord. Okay, this is my mixer, my fundamentals mixer right here, basic mixer I'm using. Now I'm using the Dexter sequencer here, which I love, synthesizer, which I love, and you've probably seen it in some of my other tutorials. I also have a number of tutorials on Dexter, so you can learn how to use it. Very, very, very powerful sequencer. Fantastic. Look it up. It's great. I also have the JW modules Quantizer right here, which is just going to let us quantize some notes. I'll use that shortly. And then down in the bottom, I have this module, the Scorovnik. Now, Scorovnik is a big module. Look at the size of that thing. It's massive. But we need that because it's a step sequencer. Now, a step sequencer means that everything moves along in steps, obviously. And this one has 32 steps, 4 groups of 8. And we can use all 32, or we can use 4, we can use as many as we want, up to 32. And we can make changes as well. But it's a 32 step sequencer. So it's fantastic. I love it, I love it, I love it. Now, let's get on with what we're going to do. First of all, a sequencer itself, what it does. A sequencer will let you choose notes and rhythms and make that into your score. Basically, it's a step or graphical representation of a score. So each step can be a rhythm, and each step can be a pitch, and also articulation like a staccato or legato or things like that. But we're not getting into that now. But that's what a step sequencer allows you to do. It allows you to organize your rhythms and your notes into a piece of music. So it's actually a representation of a score. So we can actually create the music here on the step sequencer, and it will be like looking at a score, and you'll see that in a minute. I said that it has 32 steps, and it does. You can see across here, it has 8 and 8 and 8 and 8, so it gives us a 32-step possibility. Now, it gives us many controls. This sequencer gives us many controls, and you can see there's all kinds of outputs and inputs and selection types and buttons and all kinds of things to use. We'll go over all those in this and upcoming tutorials, so stay tuned for that. But I will say, don't let this intimidate you. Step sequencers are quite simple in what they do. they have a lot of buttons because there's a lot of repetition. It's almost like sitting in front of a big mixing console with like 64 channels. But it's 64, the same buttons over and over. So it isn't that much. It looks intimidating when you first glance at it, but it really shouldn't be. So don't let anything bother you that way. Okay, let's get started. First thing I'm going to do, let's have a look at some of our basic controls and see how we can manipulate these. Now the first thing is, I want to show you these buttons across here, these little blue lights. These little blue lights across here tell us how many steps are engaged in our sequence. Now I'm going to push run right now, but I'm not going to hear anything because I got my volume turned down on the mixer. Now you can see that we have these 8 are just going across one after another all the way across these first 8. Now if I was to select this button right here, now it goes to the next one. It goes actually to 9. Or if I click right here, it will give me only 4. You can see the 4 repeat over and over. If I go over here and go all the way to the end, I'll get a 32 step sequence. So the length of the sequence is decided based on how many of these lights you have selected, and you can play with that pretty easily. That's pretty intuitive, so it's not hard to do that. Now that's the length of the sequence. That's how you're going to choose that by those buttons. Now what I'm going to do next, I'm going to put it on 8. I'm going to turn my volume up a little so we can get some sound going. And I have my sound chosen from from Dexter. You can see up here I have a little bit of a kind of a sine wave, a saw kind of variation going on here. So we may play with that as we go through the tutorial. Now we have one note playing, and you can hear the sequence is going through 8 over and over, but we have one single pitch. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the pitch. So now one step, the first step is up a little. Let's make step 3 down a little. Let's make step 4 up a little higher. It goes down. And the next one down a little bit. You can see that as I move these little red sliders, now you can hear that. We have this is a beautiful piece of music. Now I'm going to turn the volume down for a second because I want to explain something, and I don't want to be distracting you with that volume, with those notes. The red allows us to change our notes. Now you might say, Bucky, that sounds very random. What notes are they? Well, you can actually tell. If I'm going to grab my first note, I'm going to slide it up and down. It's going to move a semitone for every little notch that it's going through. And you might still say, that's so small, I can't tell what that is. Well, I'm going to do two things here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, first of all, so we can see the sequencer a little bit. And I'm going to draw your attention to this window right here. Okay, this little window right here. If I grab one of these sliders and I move it up and down, you can see, look, it's moving. The note is sliding. So if I go dead center on the starting point, it's a C. If I go down one notch, it's a B. Another notch, A sharp. So it's going down chromatically. So it's a semitone for every step. So you can use these notes very carefully to build a melody and identify which note is which over here in this little window. You can do that. It's a great way to do it. And I think that's probably, with respect to control, that's probably the best way to do it, because you'll get full control over exactly what note is being played. That's great. But if I turn it back up again, it takes a lot of very careful movement to get this exactly the place where you want it to be. But I'm going to short circuit this a little bit. I'm going to make this a little bit. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to instead of having this, instead of outputting my voltage per octave directly to the input of Dexter, I'm going to go to a quantizer. Now, for those of you that have seen other tutorials by me, we've talked about quantizers before. And quantizers will take your voltages, and sometimes it's random voltages, and will put them into a certain scale pattern or mode pattern. Now you hear it sounds a little bit more tonal, because this JW quantizer is making it into a C pentatonic. So it's a C pentatonic now. It's not just random. So you can see it sounds a bit more tonal now. Okay, so that can really help us out. Now, if you know the pitches that you want specifically, you can dial those in with your sequencer and not have to go through the little cheat that I just did with JW Quantizer. You can actually identify exactly what notes you want and choose those. So feel free. Okay, and then you can skip the quantizer part of it. Okay, now let's move on to the rhythms. Now, rhythms, they have an interesting way they do it over here on the far right of the sequencer. Let me zoom in so you can see this nice and clearly. On the far right of the sequencer, you can see that we have we have selections of duration. That's what these are right here. So let me just move these up. If I go up the first step right here, it represents another duration. And I go up another step, it represents another duration, and another duration, another duration. Now you might say, okay, Bucky, what duration is it? Okay, right now, if I turn my, I'm going to have to zoom back out a little so you can see clearly. Ooh, okay, there we go. Now, if I turn my volume back up again, I go back down so you can see the bottom spot here on these blue slider lights right here, the bottom spot is 16th notes. So every one of these values is a 16th. If I move this guy up to the next notch up, it makes that first step, an 8th note. So if I move my second one up, so I have 2 8th notes and 3 8th notes, 4 8th notes. You see, so now step number 1, 2, and 3, and 4 are all 8th notes. Step number 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all 16ths. Well, how about if I move my first one down and have the first one as a 16th? And maybe if I move my next one up to here, that third spot up is a quarter. And if I move up the next one to make my third spot up, it's now a half. If I go all the way up to the top, it's a whole note. So you can see we can change the note value, the rhythm value, the duration, by altering that slider, that blue light slider. So we're given variation. So we can create very complicated rhythm patterns by using these sliders. Now, I find this very interesting myself because we as musicians, we have various different ways of representing rhythm that we use. And that may be things like TTs and TAs for certain types of music learning. It may be things like quarter notes and eighth notes, which are written down on a piece of staff paper. There's different ways of representing rhythms. This is another way, which I find really interesting. Now, you may need some time to play with this before you really become comfortable and you get to a point where you can intuitively create the rhythms you want to create. But you certainly can, and you can create very complicated rhythms using this. So let's just have another little look and do a little bit more experimenting before we move on to the next section. I moved everything back to, I'm sorry for the movement. Here we go. I moved everything back to eighth notes, 16ths. So let's make a couple of changes. So you can see that you get some, so you can see it already, just by doing some slight variations, you can get some really interesting little rhythm patterns. Just by playing with these sliders. And I'm doing this quite randomly, but you can do it, you can be very specific of what you want there with that. Now I have to show you another thing, and this is not part of these sliders, but it's connected to the rhythms. Okay, so I'm gonna show you this one now, and I'm sorry if I'm not going to give you a lot of detail on this, but I'm just going to refer to it now, and we'll cover it more in future tutorials. There's these three rows of buttons here you can see at the bottom, they have various functions, and the functions are over here on the far right. So when the button is gray, it means something. When it's green, it means something. And when it's red, it means something. So you can see that when this row across the top, when it's green, it says dot. When it's gray, it says normal. Now I've got everything set at the 16th notes. I'm going to turn my volume up again a little bit. Ooh, you daisy, sorry about the movement. Okay, now I'm going to switch one of these to a dot. And what it does is it adds a dot to the rhythm. So it makes it into a dotted 16th note. So if I do a couple of these, so you can get all kinds of variations. So you can add dots to this. Now I know that for those people out there who are very astute musicians, adding a dot to your rhythm is very, very important. And not being able to add dots to your rhythm would be terrible, and I absolutely agree. So that allows you to even get more specific with the rhythms that you want. Now there are other ways to play with rhythms as well, but I'm not going to get into it anymore in this tutorial. I'm going to move on because I'm just covering the beginner basics for this tutorial. So we've covered already how to change the notes, the actual pitch values, and that's with the red sliders. We've learned how to change the rhythms, and that's with the blue sliders, and as well dots with this little row, the top row of buttons on the bottom. Also, we have learned about how to change the duration of the your sequence by using these blue dots, blue buttons here. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you is, well, a couple of basic controls. First of all, we have a stop, which stops our sequence, and that button is right on. You can see here we have some input controls across here, but this one here, this button here manually stops. This button here manually runs it, so it starts our sequence. So we can hit that button and we run it, hit that button and stop it. Now, I'm not going to talk about control voltage, but you can control the stop and start of your sequence with control voltages. I'm not going to get into it here now because I'll start and you'll say, wait a second, what about all these other, we're not going to talk about it today, but you can do it. The other thing too is, if I run it and stop it, and you see it's on number 4, I can reset it. I can reset by hitting my reset button. Now, let me just show you how that works. If I push stop and it's at number 4, step 4, I can hit my reset button and it will take me back to number 1. So it will start at the beginning. If I'm running it, and if I hit reset in the middle of, where it's playing along, it's in 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever, when I hit reset, it automatically takes me back to the beginning of the sequence. See, every time I hit it, it takes me back to the beginning of the sequence. It can be controlled by control voltage, but I'm not going to get into that today. Okay, now another thing I want to speak to you about are these other controls at the top here. I'm going to need a little volume for this, so I'll turn it up and I'll push run. Okay, actually let's have a little change. I'm going to change the timbre of my let's change this one. There you go, that's a nice little smooth, a little more sine wave-ish. Okay, so now, and that has nothing to do with this sequencer. That's in my synthesizer, the Valley sequencer synthesizer called Dexter. You can play with that one another time. Now, up at the top here, we got 3 controls. We have tempo, and tempo controls the speed or the tempo. And you can get a lot of variation here, so you can play with that yourself as well, but that's the tempo. Next, I want to talk a little bit about transpose here. Now, transpose, this control, transpose lets me move my entire sequence up or down by semitone. So if I go up 1 semitone, it'll go up 1 semitone or up 2. Now, you can't really tell here with this because I'm actually quantizing it. So let me just take this out of here and go directly into... Now you can hear I don't sound like a pentatonic scale anymore. It's a bit more random. But if I move now, everything went up a semitone, every single pitch. Another semitone, or down. I can do that. So it moves me by semitones. But of course, if I'm running through my quantizer makes some of those it changes things, and it doesn't really do it by semitone. Some of them will move by semitone, some of them won't. As soon as you throw a quantizer into the mix, it changes that. So if you want full control over your transposition and you want to move it exactly by semitone, you would need to bypass this whole quantizer. Not really important when it comes to what we're talking about here today, but just nice to know. Okay, so that's my transposition here. Now the other thing I want to talk to you about is looping. Now I'm going to, you'll see here we have 3 pluses, which basically means nothing. It just means continue playing until the end of time. So, but if I move my loops up to 2 or 3 or 1, what that tells me is how many times do you want the loop to play before it stops. Okay, so let's stop it, let's reset it, and let's go run. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and it stops. You see, it just hangs on a note here then, okay? But that's what it does. And I would do it again, 1, 2, and a 3rd time, and that's it. So that's how you can choose the number of loops, and you can choose a lot. I mean, you get a lot of variation here on the number of loops you want this to play. Very cool stuff, very, very cool. And if you have it at 0 or +++, it will just play infinitely, okay? So that's basically it. Now, so my controls, I already reviewed the notation controls I just mentioned to you earlier, but now let's review our controls. We have a reset, which resets our sequence back to the first step. Our stop stops our sequence, and our run starts our sequence. Tempo is the speed, of course. Transposition moves everything up and down by semitone, the entire sequence. And loops is the number of times you want it will replay over and over and over and over. Okay, so that's basically it. Now, you've seen me throughout this tutorial disconnect and reconnect my voltage per octave. That's the out right here. That's my voltage per octave. Now, I'm not going to get into what voltage per octave is because we've done it in many other tutorials, but that is our pitch out. Okay, so that's it. Now, we also have other things too, like our gate out and things, but I'm not going to get into that in this tutorial. So there you go. Now, that is the beginnings of your experimenting with the Scorovnik sequencer, step sequencer by KoralFX. Great sequencer. Be sure to go play with it. Okay, so this is the first tutorial of a few, I hope, and I'll be covering other aspects of this module in future tutorials. If you have any questions about any specific function, please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to dig into something that maybe you're looking for. You can get me here in the comments of the tutorial. You can also get me on the utopian.io Discord channel. So feel free to contact me in there, and I'll be happy to get back to you. So thank you very much for listening, and have fun making your music, and I will see you next time.